Gates said that not only does he view genetically modified foods as perfectly healthy, but that he sees them as a promising tool in a wider array of resources in the fight to reduce world hunger. GMO foods are perfectly healthy, and the techniques has the possibility to reduce starvation and malnutrition when it is reviewed in the right way, Gates wrote. I don't stay away from non-GMO foods, but it's disappointing that people view it as better. Yeah, so a couple things here. The thing about Bill Gates is he thinks he's doing the world good. He's become like, he's got to be the big, I guess, grandpa or the big, daddy with all the money to help save humanity from itself. So he's the good guy in his story. Okay, let's accept that. I don't think he's out to do harm. He's a classic example of a surgeon that wants to operate on everything. There's a concept known as iatrogenesis, iatrogenics. It's this idea that medical intervention, it's usually medical, but it could be anything. Intervention in something to kind of fix one thing or fix the thing usually results in a bunch of other unintended consequences. This is why the third leading cause of death in America is medical error. People shouldn't be in the medical system in the first place unless they had a broken arm or something and you just get it patched up, nice and easy, get out. So that's the first thing about Gates. The second thing is, like every human, it's one man, he's going to fall victim to bias. He's read probably lots and lots of things about vaccines. He's also looked at things like polio and these things where kids are literally suffering and there are real issues with certain diseases. Maybe certain vaccines in a certain context could help in some ways. I don't know enough about it. I haven't gone deep down that rabbit hole. It's hard to say, but there is a delineation here. So vaccines for everyone, established clean sanitary environment like United States versus a place like Africa where they can't even get clean drinking water. Completely different apples to oranges comparison. To say vaccines are perfect across the board or that they're needed across the board or they're going to do this across the board, that is a farce. Okay, that's fallacy. So that's another misconception that he falls victim to because he looks at these vaccines and he might see a kid with polio that can't walk and he's like, oh man, I want to fix that. And so he's like, now we need to get vaccines to everybody, including all of America and wherever else. That is a bias. That is confirmation bias. There's a whole bunch of biases going on there. GMO foods is similar as the vaccine. It's a blanket statement believing that GMOs are perfectly good for everyone. Yes, there is lacking research, but that's because we haven't had time and because we know how hard it is to test humans with nutrition. We can't lock them in a cage. We can't feed them GMO only for one group and non-GMO for another group for like 10 to 15 years and account for all the variables to make sure that we can figure out exactly what's going on. You cannot do an interventional study with something like GMOs in humans. The best you can do is send surveys and or questionnaires and somehow figure out how many GMO foods like this group ate versus that. Like, if you actually think about it, it's almost impossible. We have no idea to figure out how damaging GMOs are. And if you look at a lot of things, how long did it take for doctors to realize that smoking was bad for you? How long did it take for all these other things, asbestos and poisons and toxins? And I think we're just on the cusp of figuring out how bad the PCBs and a lot of the chemicals are for humans and how it's literally destroying our planet. This is one of those climate change things nobody's talking about. These things are environmental degradation, microplastics and everything, PCBs and everything. Yet everyone's focused on greenhouse gases, even though like water vapor from the ocean does more, like I won't get into it. I won't get into that. So we don't know if GMOs are going to have unintended consequences. But are you willing to take that risk with yourself or your kids? Unless you're starving. If you're quite literally starving, eat GMOs. Do whatever you can to get nutrition. That is like the lion that's right in front of you that's about to eat you. You shouldn't be worrying about health in 20 years if there's a lion in front of your face. Like the hunger will kill you. So obviously fix that. And this is where it gets muddy because GMOs could potentially be used to help feed a lot of people. But the problem is, the big problem is most of the reason that people are starving in other countries is a result of government corruption and inequality. The amount of aid, money, dollars, food that goes from big governments to small governments, we're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars. Yet a fraction ever reaches the people that need it the most. Usually the reason that people are starving in most countries the most is because there is a massive inequality, or there's a lack of infrastructure, or there's a lack of leadership, or there's crony and corrupt politicians. That's usually why you have so many starving people, is because they can't effectively manage things. Socialism leads to people dying through starvation and mismanagement because you don't have the incentives that happen when you have skin in the game. You don't have the incentives that you get from a free market where if you're going to invest something, do something, the market will reward you or it will punish you. And that's another topic for another day, of course. But it's all connected. And so the GMO thing is another example of that. You might not be able to prove that GMOs are harmful because we can't do studies, but you can't also prove the inverse that GMOs are not harmful because there aren't studies. So I saw this on Instagram and I responded and said that, yes, the president, Biden, other powerful people like Bloomberg, these people usually receive money from big seed companies, Monsanto, Bayer, things like that. They're all getting campaign contributions from big corporations to do their dirty work, to do their bidding, to sway a certain way. And we should have awareness around that. But at the same time, like you and I that are aware of this stuff should not be surprised. We don't even really need to spend our time on that because we know that the bigger it is, the less likely it is to be safe and or good for us. So we don't even go there. We don't even deal with it. When the masses change their spending habits to not support these big companies that might be putting GMO in the mass-produced food that's in the center of the grocery store. Like you go to the exterior grocery store, you find the small producers, or even better, you buy from your local farmer. GMOs is not a thing. Like GMOs are the mass monocrops that strip mine the environment that unfortunately you find in a lot of plant-based food, especially processed, mass-produced, plant-based junk food. And at this point, a lot of restaurant food and how they get certain vegetables and things like that and seeds and grains, like there's a lot of GMOs in our food supply that are in those places that are about speed, taste, convenience. They're not about health. They're about profit. They're about speed. They're about storage. They're about optimal yields. They're not about human health. What we need through all this is a decentralization of the food supply. We don't need a few big food companies at the top. We need thousands and thousands and thousands of small local family farms to which GMOs is not a thing. GMOs are a thing because they're a byproduct of the consolidation of agriculture that has been happening like over the past 100 years with literally millions of farmers going bankrupt and big seed companies and ag companies coming in, pesticide companies even, buying them up, suing them, doing all these things. The amount of suicides you actually see in small farmers that have lost their land, or even just medium-sized farmers that have lost their land, it's disgusting. I believe there's some documentaries on this, but there needs to be more. It's disgusting. And now it has led to big food, which has led to 1.5 to 2 million Americans a year dying, which has led to big pharma. It's all connected. As we've centralized our food supply, we've gone for profit, speed, convenience, cheaper foods that are not as good for you, that are even damaging, things like seed oils and refinement and other crap like that, that's been propped up by low-fat hypothesis. And then doctors perpetuate it, big pharma perpetuates, and then big pharma creates drugs to try to mitigate the symptoms that we get from the crap food in the first place. Food is the #1 environmental toxin for the modern Western human. Hands down, not even close. Then you have other things like lack of sleep, not getting movement, not getting outside, not getting sunlight, vitamin D, stress. There's a bunch of other things all connected, but food is definitely the biggest one. If you're eating seed oils and grains and sugar and all these things on a daily basis, nothing else you can do is going to fix that. Even if you're exercising hours a day and you can stay relatively lean, your organs are going to break down. The stress, the oxidative stress, the byproducts of processing these toxic things, the fact that seed oils literally go into your fat cells and make up your body, you become what you eat. Food is the #1 thing you have to consider. For more videos on waking up to the reality of health, nutrition, all the things in your environment that are trying to kill you, that are actually killing you, then hit the subscribe button. And if you like this video, please like it, and I'll see you in the next one.